disappear.
Oh, well, good morning, everybody. I always kind of like it when people can talk to me, but I'll be okay. So first of all, I want to thank you all for the gracious way you handled my very quick and unexpected departure last time. Dad is doing much better, and I am not in Tacoma this time, so things are a little more settled. So let's go ahead and get started. Last time when we talked, we did sort of the basic overall nutrition talk. And what I want to do this time, or what Marianne asked me to do this time, is there was some interest in how to connect the health components, the nutrition related health issues. And so we're going to package that up, and we're going to do it in a choose your own adventure style. Because it's very difficult to do them all. And I'm going to start out trying to do just 3. And then if there's more time, we'll pick the next one, and you'll get to vote on what we're going to do. It's choose your own adventure. So what are you seeing, Marianne?
Your screen.
Is it black?
No, it's food and health, connecting the two.
It's the whole thing. Okay, because it turned red around the part that I'm clicking on, and that worried me.
No, it's working beautifully.
All right, so here's our goal. We're going to look at a person-centered lens at a variety of nutrition-related concerns that are experienced by people who have Down syndrome. So you're going to decide which ones. Here's how this works. And you don't have to vote right away, but you've got time, because we'll come back to this, but I want you to see it right off the start. I think maybe this thing, oh, I can't move it. Okay, so we have 10 topics that you can choose from. They are aging and nutrition, so brain health, celiac disease, constipation conundrum, GERD or reflux, weight management, informed choices in healthy lives, medications, weighing the weight of some medications, metabolism and the balance of energy, selective eating, and support for the supporters. When the time comes, you can either do it now or you can do it later. They're numbered 1 through 10. You text Joan Medlin to 22333, and then you can text the choice that you have, or if you want to go to the web, you can go to pollev.com/Joan Medlin and do the same thing. Clear as mud? How are we doing? Questions? Just on those? I've got to get all these little windows set so I can see you guys at any moment. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Just keep those topics in mind. We're going to talk a little bit before we get to that, because there's some foundational things that I always want to point out. Wellness is more than just food. It's more than just exercise, and it's more than an absence of illness. It's all of these things, our social life, our spiritual life, our environment, our physical status, school or work, what's going on there, and then our mental wellness. All of those things together are our wellness. And when one thing is problematic, it takes up more time. Our orange here is a perfectly balanced look at wellness. And we know that sometimes things are a little bit more time consuming than others. So for instance, right now, I guess I would have to put it under social, is where I'm having to spend a whole lot of time, and that's not for my own social life, it's to support my dad. That could also go under mental wellness, because if he's not well supported, then, that's going to bother me. So that's where a lot of my time is being spent right now. But the question becomes, when you're doing these things, what gets in the way? And for a lot of us, what gets in the way are these kinds of things. When you are supporting a person with Down syndrome, or you are a person with Down syndrome, not everyone has the same definition of health and safety. Not everyone has the same definition of choice for your loved one. The rights of the person you're supporting are very important. And sometimes you spend a lot of time making sure that everybody's making their own decisions. Role modeling, being able to have people around who are modeling the expected behavior. And what is that expected behavior? Training for the people who support your loved one. I know for me, that's one of the biggest issues is the training component, making sure that they're using a person-centered lens and helping Andy live his life as he chooses and being there to pick him up when he falls. And with all of these things, what we want to use is person-centered thinking. You will hear me talk a lot about person-centered thinking, and most of you probably do this all on your own. And it's really just making sure that the person with Down syndrome is at the center of their life, that the decisions that we make are what they're interested in, not so much what we're interested in. And it's always hard to take that second step back. Today, we're going to be looking at these kinds of things more than anything else, mostly the definition of health and safety, but secondarily, we'll look at choice and role modeling because those come into play when we're looking at health and safety. So we're going to use that person-centered approach. If you were here last time, we talked about this a lot. A person-centered approach is a promise to listen with the intent to hear, act on what you hear, and then be honest about what you can and cannot do. Because there's times when you can't do what the person wants, and you need to tell them why, and what it is that's going on. And if you can't do it, just tell them you can't. But always listening with the intent to hear what they have to say, not what you want to hear, and then act on that. Oftentimes when you act on that, that's how they learn sort of the consequences of their actions. Last time we talked a lot about the feeding relationship, which is that when it's with kids, it's that our children are responsible for whether or not they eat. We're responsible for what, where, when, and how food is presented. And as they grow up, as we all grow up and become adults, we become responsible for all of those things. What, where, when, and how food is presented and whether or not we eat it. But I found that this research by, I've forgotten her first name, Michelle, maybe Pulfus, was really wonderful because it helped explain some of the things that happen when we're looking at the feeding relationship, particularly for those of us who support someone who experiences disability. So it's when we're looking at the feeding relationship, we look at the role of demandingness, which is control and monitoring, and the role of responsiveness, which is being aware of the needs and ability to foster autonomy and how those interplay. So let me show you what we've got here. So how those interplay looks like this, and nothing's ever perfect, right? So the place we're trying to go is that middle spot where the person is making their own decisions. And you'll see a variety of ways that people might over or under support or add different things. I would say that the one spot, I want to figure out how to do this. The one spot that I would want you to try and stay away from is authoritative and authoritarian, where you're making more of those decisions for the person than they are. That the research is telling us that that's more counterproductive in the long haul than even the neglectful and overly permissive, because even with these, with the right environment, a person can learn to make decisions that are different from these. But when you start to throw in the authoritarian and authoritative piece, that can make it difficult. But what her research found, and I think this is really important for all of us as parents to understand, is that when you have all sorts of things that get in the way, it starts to be hard to keep that balance. Your child's not eating, your adult's not eating, or the person only eats 3 things, or oh no, we've got celiac disease, or they're eating too much, or he gets really aggressive when he's hungry, or we got diabetes, or he's not sleeping, which means then that I'm not sleeping. All of those things get in the way of this feeding relationship balance. So remember always to be kind to yourself. And this is what her research showed, was that parents would try to do the right thing, but all these things would get in the way. And if you have 2 or 3 of these, you're going to want to control your environment as much as you can. Okay, so we're back to our menu of options. So go ahead and vote for what it is that you would like to see. Choose 3. If you want to choose 4, go ahead. We'll see what happens, because it depends on what you choose. And I'm just going to sit here on this one while I wait to see if there are results. Let me know if you have troubles. There we go. They're starting to pop in. Okay, so we've got 6 results. You ready to see where we're going to go? Well, maybe I should wait. If you're going to do 3 apiece, I should have more than 6, right? No, let's see what we've got. And I'll keep it open so that you can add more. All right, so we have, the Constipation Conundrum is winning. And then all the others are kind of the same. All right, well, let's see how we do here. I gotta get rid of this one thing that's popped up on my screen. Okay, there we go. All right, so feel free to keep voting. I will come back to this. I have it on a web page, and I will come back to it and see where we are as we get through the topics. So here's what's going to happen. I've got my list here. The purple means I was testing it out earlier, but this is the list of the things. And our top issue was the Constipation Conundrum. My vote is 3, 4, and 8. Okay, that's fine. 3, 4, and 8. All right. I will write that down. Okay, so let's start with the Constipation Conundrum, which is, I think, maybe number 3. Can't remember. First of all, let's start with defining what it is. So constipation is going to be when you're not having a bowel movement in more than 3 days, is the official diagnosis of it. Okay, that's how they define it. For some people, it can be, let me take that away. For some people, it's less than that. For some people, it's more. And part of why we deal with constipation has to do with low muscle tone, as you know. So let's go a little farther. We want to know what to do. We're going to ask some questions about drinking. I will say, though it's not the perfect thing to say, diet pop can count as hydration, but you don't want to drink too much of it because it'll have some bloating. You certainly don't want to count regular pop as your hydration because of all the sugar. It's really not a hydration component. So you want to see if they're drinking enough. There's lots of ways to encourage that. We'll talk about that in a minute. You want to look at the fiber that the person's eating. There's a difference in fiber. One is called insoluble fiber from foods, and that's whole grains, fresh fruits, and vegetables. That insoluble fiber is what provides the bulk. If you're not drinking enough, that bulk can be why it's not moving along, but usually bulk helps it move along. Soluble fiber is from foods like oat bran and legumes and other, I'm trying to think of another thing, oat bran, legumes. Legumes are like dried beans, peas, and lentils. And that soluble fiber, the reason that it's helpful is that it soaks up the water and it does add to the bulk, but it keeps it soft enough that it can pass. So you can see if all you're getting is the soluble fiber, it could get too hard to pass. You get some of that soluble fiber in there also, and make sure you're drinking enough, and it'll grab, your bowel movements will grab the water and be soft enough to pass. The other good thing about soluble fiber that you all probably know is it helps keep your cholesterol down. Just always a fun fact. Then you want to look at exercise, and it doesn't have to be walking or an aerobic exercise, though that is very good. It can also be just stretching, doing yoga, some sort of calisthenic thing, dancing. Dancing's a great exercise, but getting some exercise where the whole body is moving. Walking is super good because it stimulates the gut to move. It stimulates peristalsis, which is the movement of the gut. So peristalsis is a continual squeezing of your intestine to move things along. And that's a big part of why exercise helps. Well, there I said that. And then consider fiber alternatives, such as Benefiber, Metamucil, are two soluble fiber alternatives. Miralax is something that a lot of people use. So why is it saying it again? Isn't that interesting? All right, let's go forward. One more. Yep, it didn't work. All right, so the other thing you can do is I have a recipe I can send you for what's called a constipation cookie. And it's a very helpful thing that can move things along. If you get to the point where you've done all of these things and constipation is still an issue, then you want to work with your physician to have what's called a bowel management plan. When do I add milk with magnesia? When do I use a laxative or stool softener? Which ones are the most important? I think what is the hardest to help people understand is that the low muscle tone that we talk about for folks with Down syndrome it's pervasive. It's all through your body, and that's a part of what makes constipation happen. So remember I talked earlier about peristalsis. So if this was your intestine and you're looking at it this way, most people when their guts are doing peristalsis, it goes all the way shut like that and it pushes everything forward, right? So it pushes it all forward. But if you have low muscle tone, it might only close this far and still leave a little piece here, and some gets left behind, and then that starts to build up. So sometimes you're having decent bowel movements, but you have a little bit left behind, and so that starts to build up, and then it gets harder and harder to get it out. So then it builds up there, and that's why we need a little extra help sometimes. The other thing that can happen is with that if you're not getting enough hydration and you have a really hard stool, if you have low muscle tone, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to get enough of a push to get it to go forward. So those are reasons why that's an issue. And I think it helps to understand that. I think it also helps to understand the definition of constipation being no bowel movement in 3 days. For some people, you're going to find that you wanted to start taking action on day 2. And how do you figure that out? That's that person-centered approach where you sit down and depending on the person you're working with, your son or daughter, you're not really working with them, but depending on your own situation, figure out a way to communicate about it. I have a friend whose son started to become concerned about his own bowel movements, and he started doing these hash marks in his day planner. And apparently he really likes his day planner. And by doing that, she caught on that he was having a lot of stools, and that turned out to be related to celiac disease. But that's another way to do that. Okay, questions about constipation?
I don't see any.
I don't know if that was helpful, but that's the deal with that, and definitely the walking really helps. Even if you know that the reason you're going for a walk is because you need to have a bowel movement, just that activity and getting things moving is very, very helpful. Okay, so any more votes for number 2? Are we going to vote any more? I see Raquel came in. I'm trying to figure out how to tell Raquel to. Were you able to vote, Raquel? Or are you the?
It says she's having trouble with the text, so.
All right, if you want to just type it into the chat or the question place, I have 3, 4, and 8 for Lynn.
Raquel is saying 1, 8, and 6.
1, 8, and 6. 1, 8, and 6. All right, we'll go to 6 next. 6 is informed choices and healthy lives. You guys are all over the board, which is good. It's part of why we choose our own adventure. Okay, so when it comes to choices, and I'm actually glad this one is, I would have preferred it to be first actually, but it sets the groundwork for everything. Everything that I do comes with an informed choice. I want to make sure that people understand to the best of their ability what's going on. So does the person know what the choices are? Does the person understand the impact of the choices that are available to them? And that is really where most of the time is spent. It's on educating and understanding, okay, if you choose this, then this, kind of talking that through. We'll have some examples. And then is the person making a choice that a reasonable person would make? And that's a legal component to an informed choice. So this is the legal definition. And what that means is it's not really reasonable for a person to choose to sit on the yellow line in the middle of the road. That's just a definite health and safety thing. But there are many people who are considered to be reasonable people who would eat the entire rotisserie chicken. So we have to kind of look at that when we're looking at informed choices. There are lots of ways to offer informed choices. And if you don't know me very well, this is where I really like to get involved with things, is to point out things like, how can we make these informed choices and make them understandable? We start with, and I don't know the age of folks who are here, that your son or daughter or you are, but all parents, I always ask them, do you regret this one? This more? You see it a lot. So, but the choices when it comes to the first choices that we're making is more all done and ooh, no way. And we need to be able to make those choices always. I want more of this. I'm all done with it and don't get it anywhere near me. And those are all reasonable options, even when they're young. And when we talk about picky eating with the young ones, we go through that a lot. I want to make sure that I always point out how important it is to be able to say, I'm all done or no way. I don't want to be doing that. And the reason is we want to make sure that we're promoting self-confidence, that we're promoting that the person has choices in their life and they have control over their life and their choices. And then just to remember, generally speaking, being able to say, no, I'm not going to do that, particularly for a student who's receiving special education services, that is traditionally discouraged. That compliance for me is a 4-letter word. And you just kind of have to work with, when you're looking for getting something in a particular way done, you have to look at how you do that. But we want to make sure that we're giving that opportunity, because later it becomes a safety issue. If you don't know how to say no, then you're not going to know how to say no if somebody's asking you to do something that would be harmful, something that's illegal, or something that might be abusive to you. So we want to make sure that they know their power, their no has power. These are some ways that I've used early choice making, and these clearly you can see are real life examples from Andy's life. I started out with a 1-pager that had 3 things on it. These weren't the 3 things, but what I've learned is that you have to be able to change up your choices if you have someone who's using an augmentative tool or whatever. So this type of tool it provides a couple of different things. One is you can say, these are the limitations for our snack options up here in the right corner. These are what we have available today for snack. And when they're younger, I always make sure to tell people you can have other options on the back here. And this is a magnetic strip here that allowed me to put it on the refrigerator. But you always want to make sure that you have the thing that you say is the option for the day, or you'll pay a price no matter what's going on. But by saying these are the options that we have, you're then sort of limiting what they know is appropriate for later on in the day. That's one way to kind of get into that choice making piece. But if they have all sorts of options that are things that they like, but are the things that you want, that will help. Another thing that helps is sitting down and doing menus together. And then once you make that menu, or even if you're doing the menu on your own, once that menu is made, displaying that menu option so that it does two things. One is we've made this menu together, or these are the options for lunch, however you want to look at that. The other thing that I have found that it does is it really helps save sanity for moms or the people who are supporting, because what I have come to understand is that even if a person, I don't want to say even, but even though people know how to read time and they know that lunch is at 2 or 12 or whenever, then it doesn't mean that in their routine that matters. And what I'm trying to say is when we finish breakfast, the next big thing that happens in the day is lunch. And I learned over time that people weren't asking about lunch or dinner because they were focused on food. They were asking because it was the next big thing in the day. And they wanted to know what the next big thing was. And they were thinking about that. Or it's a natural break that's pleasant. Think about if you're at work, your next break is lunch. Oh, yeah, let's think about lunch. Or if you're at school, next big break is lunch. Or if you're an adult and you're managing your own life, the next big thing that you're going to do is lunch. So you start thinking about the next big thing. So by displaying the option or displaying what's going to happen, here's what we're going to make, or here's what is available for lunch. You've taken away the question. You say, I don't know, go look at the menu. What's for dinner, Mom? I don't know, go look at the menu. It requires some planning, but it helps. It helps to have a plan in place so that the anxiety, which isn't necessarily a negative thing, the anxiety or the excitement about the next thing, what am I going to cook for lunch, is all taken care of. It's all planned for them. And then they can think about how they're going to do that, what it's going to look like, and etc. We'll move on to a different conundrum, right? The other thing about informed choices that I found really fascinating was some research that I found on what influences does each person see and feel around the informed choices this was around exercise, but I think you could probably apply this concept in many different ways. So for instance, 70% of the support providers said that the people they work with had more energy after exercising. They also felt the financial cost of exercising was a problem for the person with a disability. And then the support providers also felt that the support providers were more likely to notice an improvement in joint pain and movement. But the people with intellectual developmental disabilities felt that only 30% of them felt a change in energy. So not everybody felt that same thing that the support providers saw. The people with developmental disabilities felt the financial cost was too great. And very few of the support providers thought that financial cost was too great. Are you seeing the differences here? And then support providers, as I said, they saw an improvement in joint pain, but the people with developmental disabilities did not. So really, you have to think about which voice matters in those decisions. And if the person is involved in the decisions and knows what the options are and the consequences of those actions, they are more apt to buy into the improvement or wait for the improvement. I said earlier I would give some examples, and I know that the slide's not going to provide that for us. So let's come up with an example. Sometimes I had a couple of people I worked with who were just diagnosed with celiac disease, and I'll be super honest. This one gal was in a post-secondary program out in Maine, and she had celiac disease for a while, and her mom had gotten some really great support for them and information around celiac disease. And this is before being gluten-free was a trend in the general public. So it was harder to find gluten-free foods. She basically schooled me on how to eat gluten-free. And this is before Andy had celiac disease. So we went through the store and she taught me all these things, and her knowledge of how to eat gluten-free was just stunning. She could find the gluten-filled things super easily. She could do all sorts of things. And then as they moved into their apartments in the post-secondary program, you know, she was the only one that had to eat gluten-free, and she just couldn't take it anymore. She knew that there were consequences to her actions if she chose not to eat gluten-free, but she had not yet experienced them firsthand. And so she chose to have, I think they had a pizza party and she chose to eat the regular pizza. I don't think there was a gluten-free option. I don't remember all of that piece, but she chose to eat this regular pizza, and she was very ill for a week afterwards, just very ill. And we talked about it, and I said, well, so how do you feel about that? And she came to that conclusion that she didn't want to do that anymore. So we talked about things that she could do if she was in that situation again. Do I think she's going to make a decision to eat some gluten again? Maybe, probably. I think most people with celiac disease really struggle with this. I think it's easier now. But she knew the consequences and she still made a decision. And again, that's our job, to be there to kind of support when they pick up. You know, when they fall down, we can support them and help them and pick them up, and we can move forward from there and just say, this happened, what do we do next? This topic will start showing up in each of the other things that we talk about as we go forward. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the menu, and we'll think about the next one. But what questions do you have that you want to put on that? And while you're typing those in, I just saw the one about 8 glasses of water a day. You know, there's no research around. They say there's research, but there isn't actually any evidence to say how much water. And I think each person is different. If you can get 8 glasses of water in, more power to you. That would be great. I've chosen to do it more as we build it into the day, and it's just a routine. So certain times of the day, like when we come back from a walk, we all sit down and have some water. We also use popsicles. When Andy's not feeling well, we use Jell-O. So we try different things. You can count watermelon as a hydrator. You know, kind of going down that path of what are the different ways that we can hydrate, and just use all of those. And I'll tell you, my dad has been the biggest challenge I've ever had in drinking water, or just getting enough fluid in him. And we ended up doing things like lining up some glasses of water, depending on how long I was planning to be there. And we, you know, every so often, like every 20 minutes or so, I would say, oh, I'm going to have a glass of water. Here, Dad, here's your glass of water. So there's lots of ways to do it. But yeah, they say 8 glasses of water. I don't think very many people actually do that. So I would pay attention to your son or daughter and kind of individualize it from there. Any other questions?
I don't see any.
All right. So our third topic what did she choose? 8. Oh, I gotta go back. Where's the chat? The chat has lost. I have lost.
1, 8, and 6 was
Thank
one.
you.
1, 8, and 6, and then Lynn's vote was 3, 4, and 8.
All right, so we'll do number 8. And this one's really good. And we can blend it into weight management. So we'll try to do both of those, I think. Okay, so let's talk about metabolism. You all know, have all heard that people who experience Down syndrome have a lower basal metabolic rate. The research that we currently have is that the basal metabolic rate is decreased by 10 to 15%. That means that when they're at rest, not moving, just breathing, that they use 10 to 15% fewer calories than they do when they're moving around. The other thing that affects metabolism is thyroid. It can be too much thyroid or too little thyroid. Both of those things are possible for our loved ones with Down syndrome. So let's talk about this metabolism piece. I don't know if any of you know a lady named Mia Peterson who recently passed away, but she was the first self-advocate I worked with, and she was so interested in food and nutrition and healthy living. We did a number of surveys. We had a couple of articles published. She's just really amazing to work with. So, she has Down syndrome, and she came up with this analogy all by herself. I use it all the time. Let's say Joan and I are the same weight and height. If I eat a cookie and she eats a cookie that's just like it, it will take me longer to burn those calories. And I was just, it was the best example. I think she taught me about plain language and health literacy in doing that. But again, that's only when they're at rest. So what we don't know, but there's some research, I'm excited about this. They're starting to actually do the research I want, which is, are we spending more calories in activities than a person without Down syndrome? Because sometimes you have to think, sometimes it's hard. Oops, it didn't really show up. And I think I'm missing a few slides. So there's a guy whose name I've now forgotten, who's starting this research, and he based it on walking. And what he learned was, in the first few minutes of walking, as a person's starting to walk and getting up to a good speed, people with Down syndrome were actually expending more energy in that first part of the walk than a person who's the same height and weight and does not have Down syndrome. But then when they got into their groove and they were kind of walking along, they were expending about the same amount of energy. It was really fascinating research, and I'm hoping that he will take that a little farther and that we'll learn a little bit more. It's a super important thing for us to understand, and also weighs in on how we do things. The other thing he looked at was he looked at why that would be so. And so the reason that, as I understand it, the reason that it was like that was because as you get up to your cruising speed, that folks with Down syndrome have a gait issue. And it's not that it's a bad thing, it's just that the way they walk, because of the ligature of their legs, that's what's causing them to spend more energy. And then once they get into their groove, their body's moving just fine. And that's when it all kind of levels out and everybody's the same. And in many ways, it what I want to say, validates the theory that I have that it's got to be harder at times to do certain things, and we've got to spend more calories doing them. So that's a piece of that. What I want to do from here, because the other choice was, what was the other choice? 8 and 6, and Well, what I want to do from here is I'm going to go into weight management because I know that's one that people always want to do. And I want to talk, because I'm going to go straight from that metabolism piece into the weight of adulthood. And there's really good new research around this. So the first thing that we have to talk about is appetite. And just the whole idea of helping, oops, I don't know what that is. Helping our sons and daughters understand, how their appetite plays into things and what is hungry and full. And I encourage you to have those kinds of discussions and to think about it in a way that is as tangible as possible. I mean, down to listening to your stomach. And you can see, like on the slide there on the right side, the hungry gal, might be your left side. Anyway, the hungry gal, you can see a number of things. You've got pain in your stomach. You start to salivate when you're hungry. And that's something that people don't really recognize as a sign of hunger. You also start to not be able to make decisions well. You might get angrier. There's a whole variety of things that can happen there. And when we're talking about, learning this, let me go back. When we're learning this, the best thing you can do is make it as tangible as possible. The one that I've done, it sounds kind of dorky, is to do the old fashioned, I think it's Weight Watchers who started talking about it the most, but set the timer. And if you can get a timer that doesn't ding, that helps a lot. And use some mindfulness techniques about, 20 minutes later, are you still hungry? Another mindfulness technique is to eat until you don't feel hunger anymore. And then talk about what that feels like when you eat just enough that you're not hungry anymore. What does that feel like? And then when you know that you've overeaten, and it sounds counterintuitive, but I would recommend doing it when someone has overeaten. Talk about what that feels like and write it down. So you sort of write down how it feels when they've overeaten, how they feel, how uncomfortable they are, if they can't sleep, whatever it is, lots of burping. It could be a lot of different things. And then how they feel when they eat just enough, and how they're able to go out. Like one of the things I would try to get into that descriptor is how you're able to go out and do things with lots of energy when you've eaten just enough, as opposed to when you've eaten too much. Going for a walk just sounds horrible, or playing with your niece or nephew, or going out to do something with your friends just doesn't sound fun. You just kind of want to go take a nap. Describing those things, writing them down, and that's how you get to your informed decision making and your mindful eating. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to pretend that it's not a lot of work, but it's very hard to make hunger and full tangible. And it's very hard to make weight gain and weight loss tangible. So that's one way to make it tangible, is to either talk about it and write it down, draw a picture. How do you feel right now? Draw a picture. Whatever it is that works for communicating that feeling. So I would work on that. And then we know that weight management, we talk about it as being the energy expenditure, it's a simple equation, but I'm pretty certain each and every one of you has been on a quote unquote diet, and you know that it's so much more than that. There's so much involved in losing weight. And if you're someone who's underweight, there's so much more involved in gaining weight. So both of those are a challenge. What we've learned about folks with Down syndrome is that this process, whether you're gaining weight, losing weight, or staying the same, it has to be fun. So you want to make sure that you're having a good time. I'm not quite sure how to turn that off. Let's see. So if I do that, you should be able to hear me for a minute. So these guys, this is Christy and Austin, and they're salsa dancing. And you can see they're having fun. Yes, they're doing a demonstration, but they're having a really good time. And that's a super important part of weight management. So now you can see Christy's on her treadmill, and she's not really doing much. She's got some stuff in her ears, but she's just kind of plodding along. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And now you can see she's still on her treadmill, but look at what's going on here. She's got her favorite song in her ears and she's dancing to it. She feels comfortable enough at her gym that she can do her walking and dance. So here's the difference. Here she's pretty much jogging here, right? So you think, oh, she's burning more calories here, but which one is she more apt to do for longer? The one where she's dancing and enjoying her music, or the one where she's jogging along there and having a tough time keeping up and nothing to keep her happy, or when she's dancing with her husband? So which of those workouts do you think that she's more apt to want to go to? So keeping it fun is super important. I do have this story of Stephen. Now, Stephen was younger when I first met him and started working with him. He lives in Virginia. And Stephen had heart surgery at like age 5 or so. And his parents, had been pouring the calories into him to get him ready for heart surgery. And then after he got through the heart surgery and was well, they couldn't stop pouring the calories, and they were so happy that he was eating and growing. And then he got kind of large, and his mom reached out to me. She was super concerned. And, Stephen was young when we started working together. I think he was around 8 or 10. And basically we did that thing where you talk about it, they have to grow into their weight. When they're still growing, I don't want to see weight loss. I want to see people grow into their weight. And Stephen did that. And the secret to success for Stephen was ownership. His mom had been packing him beautiful, wonderful lunches at school, and he was trading them for Twinkies and Ding Dongs and Oreos and all that. And so we set up a system where he got to build his own lunch. He had to make the choices. What's going to go into your lunch? And sometimes he made it. Most of the time, mom made it. But he was allowed to build his own lunches and make those choices. And once he started choosing what was in the lunch bag, he was unwilling to trade it. He had chosen what he wanted. And that was like the first step to things kind of leveling off and working out. It's not the only thing, I'm sure, but it was for her the thing that made it the most doable. So we want to make it doable. So we want to find ways to track it. We have lots of ways to track things. This is Christy again. We would meet on FaceTime and talk things over. She would send me pictures of different menus. She'd look stuff up online. We'd used it. This is a dry erase board I created, and you can count up the number of servings of something that you eat in a day to try to count your number of servings. And that includes the sometimes foods down here. And I tried not to give too many options for that so that we don't go too far. This was actually the best tool for Christy for a very long time. It's called her Jewel book. It's just one of those, this is the time of year where everybody sends you a new calendar. And she had different stickers, and they were all kind of jewels, but different stickers for different things, different goals that she was trying to do. And I couldn't even tell you the coding on them. Some of them were food related. Some of them were getting to work on time related, etc. And she really found that useful. And then these on the right, these are a set of cards. I don't know if you guys are old enough to know, what is his name? Richard Simmons. He had a deal-a-meal thing that he did where you put all the cards for the day on one side, and then as you use them, you move them to the other side. It's such a great concept because you're moving things. So I made all these business card size things. See, here they are. And what I did with each one is say, here's a dairy card, and it shows pictures of dairy, but on the back side of it, I need to find one so I know what it says. Well, on the back side of it, it says what a serving size is. So for folks who can read easily, who just need a little reminder of how many things are serving, it can be a nice little thing to say, I have 3 of these a day. I have, and I have my activity card, and we have the special occasions are something different. We have the free food card, and on the back of the free foods, we define what a free food is. So for some people, this is a really great tool. The thing that I have found the most challenging is to find a holder to move them back and forth in. I mean, I ordered business size cards. They don't fit in here without trimming them. I don't understand, but that's a tool, and it makes it really tangible. Even if they can't read, if they aren't reading the back side, they will learn. People will learn and know what a serving size is and be able to move them back and forth. It's something that happens. This up here in the corner is a weight chart. I do a chart. I don't do it so that you can see your weight. I started at 0. Whatever your weight is today is 0. And this is in my book. I've used it for so long. But the colored in part that you can see, I want the spotlight. The colored in part right here is, or do I have to do here? No, I don't know how that works. But the colored in part, the yellow part right here, is the number of minutes of exercise that the person was doing. And if you're doing this, you will find that the number of exercise, minutes of exercise directly correlates to what happens to your weight. But this person charted their weight from like many months before I worked with them, and we kind of looked at it all and how it went down and up and all of that. And it becomes a very tangible thing. It's the best way I've found to make my weight change feel tangible. Oh, here's Christy's jewel book. That's what it looked like. Another point to keep in mind is that willpower is a myth and self-control is a myth. These are not things that make or break a person, because even when you take the exit to willpower, the snack cart's out all over the place to tempt you, and just having enough willpower isn't what you want to do. The last thing I want to cover, I'm in my last 4 minutes, so I'll be really fast. The last thing I want to cover is the energy equation of change. I read a book called The Powerful Engagement, and it made so much sense. Basically, they said research tells us that 5% of our behavior is consciously self-directed, and 95% of what we do occurs automatically or in response to a demand or an anxiety that's going on around us. So like somebody slams a door, you automatically want to know what that is. That was a reaction, or you might act on it. And it's not something you chose to do. So we have 5% of our energy, our mental energy and choice making, to really make those informed decisions in a day. And when we think about that, that's not a lot of our conscious energy. Most of the stuff we do is a reaction. Somebody puts a candy bar in front of us, we eat it. Or somebody puts a candy bar in front of us. Some of us, like if there's something you don't like, what do I not like? A mint thing. If you put a mint in front of me, I won't even consider it. If you put a Moonstruck chocolate in front of me, that's not even a consciously self-directed decision. It's I want that chocolate. So those are the kinds of things we want to think about. When we're looking at that, I looked at, this is Christy again. We looked at Christy's activity schedule, and he's like, if she only has 5% of her mental energy to make self-directed decisions, where is that planning time going to be? Where is it for her? Because she's so busy. All of those things were things that she was doing, including this piece that was pervasive. When you have downtime, memorize your lines for this week for a play that she was in. So I kind of had to say to her mom and her mother-in-law, where is the time for Christy to really work on herself? I just don't see it. It's a different kind of time crunch than what we as parents feel when we're doing work and supporting them at school and, getting the groceries and all those different things, but it's still there. You build these lives that are so busy, and they like it, they love it, but when you need to make behavior change, you need some space for that to happen. So basically I tell people to stop, take a big deep breath, and then think about what your options are. So this one is related to the 20-minute rule, but anytime you're trying to make a behavior change, if I can get them to just think about stopping, taking a big deep breath, consider the options in front of them, and then make a decision. That's a really big deal in teaching that process of doing. Go. All right, so these are our challenges: making it concrete, keeping it real, the time involved, the energy involved, and there's so many other things that are more fun to spend your energy. Oops, we're not going to do celiac disease, so then we'll go back here, and then we'll go here. And I'm just going to end this up with a little piece. How do I start? Set them up for success. Instead of thinking about the problem, and anytime you're thinking about medical issues, we tend to think about the problem. Instead of thinking about that, change your thinking to how can I set them up to be successful in where we need to go? How can I set them up for success in drinking more water or getting more hydration? How can I do that? The keys are communication. We've talked about this a lot. All these things you'll see. Here's the choice, choice, choice. We all know positive behavior support strategies. We talked about it a lot for school. Start thinking about it for home. What is the thing that will give them the buy-in to do the thing you need? And then the tools for your toolbox. Remember those visual strategies you fought so hard for in school? Visual strategies will work. Video modeling, seeing that, and that's when you take a video of how it looks beforehand so you can plan ahead. Pre-teaching, role play, repetition is a big one. Grooves, if you don't know about grooves, go to my website and download the Disability Solutions. I think you're going to have to get the whole set to get it, but there's a nice article about what grooves are by Dennis McGuire. It's just about routines. List making, we all like to make lists. Being curious, just being curious about why things are the way they are. So that's kind of the list. Oops, we talked about this already. Okay, and then the place to begin, the best place to begin is always what's important to the person, so that you know most of these things, but sometimes sit down with them and say, what's important to you related to this? And then what's important for them? So there's a difference. Important to is the things I'm interested in, and important for the things that keep me safe and healthy. So finding a balance between that, because if you have too much of what's important for, life isn't any fun. And then what works and what doesn't work. You know these things, and sitting down, you spending your 5% of mental energy to sit down and think about what works for them and trying to blend that into the equation is a big part of it. And then when you've kind of made those lists, you can talk about it, and as you go through and try things, talk about it. What have we tried? What did we learn from it? What are we still concerned about? And what are we pleased about? And what are our next steps? Because every time you try something, it's not going to always work the first time. You're always going to need to move forward. So I hope you'll take some time to come up with some next steps. I'm already 3 minutes after. And then remember, as I always say these days, I imagine you being able to do this and being happy. Please, please feel free to email me. That's usually the easiest way to get to me. Ask me questions. You can go to my website for questions in there. Sometimes it takes me a while to find those things because I'm just not always that smart, but I'd be happy to do that. And I will indeed send the recipe to the Constipation Cookies, one of my favorites.
Joan, do you have time just to answer a quick question about what the portion size for a 10-year-old would be?
Sure. For a 10-year-old. What is that, the whole question?
Yeah, what is recommended portion size for a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome? Always difficult for me to figure this out.
So what I would suggest to keep it just typical, I would suggest that because you're not going to find any evidence that says that there's anything different. I would go to the myplate.gov place and get the kids pyramid up. Those are your portion sizes. What's really difficult about using the pyramid and the government portion sizes and government things is that we know that we're probably going to want to eat a little bit less. And in order to get, if you do everything that's in their pyramid, it's for kids, I think it's more, it's probably 1,400 calories. You have to eat 1,440 calories of real food, perfect real food, meaning nothing extra, to get all of the vitamins and minerals. And that's what the pyramid is based on. So what I would do, instead of worrying about that, I would just get what the portion sizes are on there. I'd say probably when you're eating meat, 2 ounces is probably fine. I would lean towards the lower end of the ranges that are on that pyramid. But as far as portion sizes, I tend to think of them as the same size. It's really the number of them. But you're thinking about setting up a plate. So I would err on, in my perfect world where everybody eats everything, which doesn't exist, but in my perfect world, I would err on the side of a half a cup for vegetables, and maybe a third a cup for fruits. A portion, I would look at a third a cup of rice, and 2 ounces of meat, and then maybe a 6-ounce glass of milk if you were doing milk. Does that make any sense? You can just type it in the chat.
I don't.
Those are hard questions because it's really pretty individual.
Mm-hmm.
But you can just use the pyramid as a guide for what a portion size or serving size is.
I really like the My Plate just because it's so visual too.
Yeah. So I created this little doodad. So we have this is your My Plate, and the way they do it, but really you want it to look like that. You want it to be mostly fruits and vegetables, non-starchy things, and then over here is your meat. But the amount, one of the ways to help with it is to use a salad plate as opposed to a big dinner plate, and that will help. And then you can use that plate division on that salad plate. That would probably help.
Right. That makes sense. She says thank you, so that obviously helped, Joan.
Well, I don't know if it does, but she said thank you, so I'll stop talking about it.
Well, really, seriously, thank you for everything. You're a wealth of information, and we always love having you come back. You could talk for hours and hours, and we could listen for hours. So we're really
well,
great.
I'd rather like sit down and play, but
Right. No, we never get enough chance to go through all your tools and all the good stuff, but
all my toys, yeah.
Your toys, exactly. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Joan. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you all. I appreciate your willingness to be here. Have a wonderful day, and do feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joan.
All right.